Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. And now, from the Seehafer News Studio, your moderator, Brian Norton.
And we welcome you to the first of our three Seehafer News 2020 candidate debates. Our first debate today will have the two candidates that are going to be vying for a 2-year term in the 2nd Assembly District that represents constituents in northern Manitowoc County, northern Brown, and a sliver of Outagamie County, basically encompassing a portion of the city of Wrightstown. And joining us in the vying for your vote will be the incumbent Republican Shae Sortwell, and he is being challenged by Democrat Mark Kiley of Two Rivers. And gentlemen, Mr. Sortwell and Mr. Kiley, welcome to our WOMT studios in today's debate. Glad to have both you gentlemen here.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And before we do get going, we do want to remind you that we are going to be allowing both candidates to give their opening statements. And it was determined before we entered the studio that Mr. Sortwell and Mr. Kiley discussed it, and Shae Sortwell has decided to go first, so we will allow him to give his 90-second opening statement, to be followed by Mr. Kiley. And I will give a couple of questions here to begin the debate, and each candidate will have 90 seconds maximum to respond. Then we will also, during the course of the debate today, take texts from our WOMT Shoreline text line, and if you have anything that you would like the candidates to expound on, you must use the area code 920-682-4674. That is 920-682-4674. A reminder, we will not be taking telephone calls today. Just too much going on here, so we will not take any phone calls. We do encourage you, though, to take advantage of our WOMT Shoreline text line at 682-4674. And again, you must use the area code 920. So why don't we begin today's debate? And we are going to turn it over to incumbent Republican Shae Sortwell. And Mr. Sortwell, you have 90 seconds to give your opening statement. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Well, thank you so much for allowing us to have this time here on Cub Radio as well as WMT. I appreciate it, Brian. I appreciate our sponsor, who is gracious enough to host this, so that the people of Wisconsin, the people of the 2nd Assembly District, can hear directly from us. I think it's critically important, especially when it's been more difficult this year. I think my opponent would agree with me. It's been a lot more difficult to get out into the community and try to talk one-on-one with people. Been trying to do as much as I can to get out there and make sure that people know what it is that I stand for, what it is that I'm trying to accomplish. And but it's been tough this year. So I appreciate this opportunity to speak directly to the people and to be able to explain to them what I'm all about. So I think I've made it pretty clear what I've been all about. I'm finishing up my first term. I'm just finishing up my first term now in Madison. And I was elected in 2018. So I think I've made clear over the last 2 years what it is that I stand for. I stand for your freedoms. I stand for your liberty. I actually stand for small government. And that's something that a lot of politicians like to give lip service to. But honestly, it's something that too often we let our own personal preferences get in the way. And I think that is something that we need to get away from and say, what are the guiding principles that we are supposed to follow? And the guiding principles are the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and your individual freedoms. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Got to pot that up. I'm sorry. Thank you, Representative Sortwell. And now, Mr. Kiley, you have 90 seconds to give your opening statement. Go ahead, please.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. Let me begin by thanking you, Mr. Moderator, and your staff here at Seehafer Broadcasting, and obviously Novak Service Center for putting on this conversation together. It's much appreciated. As you know, I am running for 2nd District Assembly and would like to have the support of the voters in the 2nd District. So it's crucial that I probably should introduce myself a little bit. I have recently traveled around the district speaking with community leaders and administrators along with the voters of the area to discuss what I hear are genuine concerns. And they desire a change. Many express frustration and fear about the political culture that seems to be collapsing or diminishing, if you will. Many are tired of partisan behavior and the unwillingness to get along, especially during a pandemic period. Issues and community problems don't seem to be adequately addressed, and as a result, they feel that they are not heard properly or represented. I was born in Two Rivers, raised my children here as well. Concerns disturb me. I care about this district. I listen to this district. I volunteer in this community, possess a desire to serve this community, and I would like your vote. Thank you.
And we thank you, Mr. Kiley. And now we're going to get to a few questions that I have. And again, we will get to some of your previously sent in emails that we'll have the gentleman expound on. And again, if you have any text questions that you would like to have either one of the two candidates talk on, use our WOMT Shoreline text line at 920-682-4674. I'll begin here with Mr. Sortwell. You said something in your opening statement that really, I guess, caught my attention in regards to how difficult it has been to get out and talk with people because of the pandemic and so on and so forth. With that in mind, because opportunities have been so limited, how important has it been to maximize the time that you have and get to know people deep down and what their true concerns are so you can take those and make sure that you represent to the best of your ability the constituents' wishes and needs down in Madison. Would you go ahead, please?
Sure. So what I think most people want, and from what the conversations I have had, before this happened, even last time around when I was running my first time around, what I've heard from people is they want government to be as small as possible and to leave them alone. There's a basic principle that comes through in true Americanism coming down all the way from our history, which is that if you're not bothering your neighbor, then the government shouldn't bother you. I mean, it's a pretty simple concept and something that unfortunately too often politicians, whether Republican or Democrat, forget about it. And instead they start trying to put in place their own personal preferences and their own personal beliefs. And I've had to sometimes stand against Democrat proposals or Republican proposals, and be able to tell them, look, no, this is not what the people want. What the people want is to be left alone. They don't want crony capitalism. They want real capitalism. They don't want government nanny state. They want to be able to take care of themselves. This is what the people of Wisconsin want. And that's what I've been hearing all over the place.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley, in your interaction with people, what has really, struck a nerve with you and want to make sure that you, if you do get elected to represent the 25th Assembly, that you represent your constituents to the best of your ability down in Madison?
Well, the biggest concern that we're coming across is the concern with the COVID virus, that not enough is getting done to eliminate that problem. The other concern is the education system, where people can't go to school, and many of the children that are out there right now in rural areas don't have broadband. And that's an issue when they go home and they need to do online learning. That's a problem. And coupled with that, the second biggest issue would wind up being, look, they're tired of partisanship and people need to get along. They need to play nice in a sandbox so we can have real, genuine solutions to genuine concerns. And that's what I've been hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Again, if you are just tuning in, welcome here to 107.9 WOMT and 97.1 WCUB. This is the first of our three candidate debates presented by Seehafer News and Novak Service Center, Manitowoc. I'm Brian Norton, your moderator, and joining us are candidates to represent the 2nd Assembly District, comprising of a majority of northern Manitowoc, northern Brown, and a sliver of Outagamie County in the city of Wrightstown. The incumbent is Republican Shae Sortwell, being challenged by Democrat Mark Kiley. Gentlemen, we just have a shoreline text line question that has come in. And Mr. Kiley, I guess I'll begin with you this time. You'll have 90 seconds to respond, please. Question is, with both Michigan and Illinois legalizing recreational marijuana, what is your opinion on legalization here in Wisconsin? You have 90 seconds, sir.
Well, I have a respiratory condition. I don't know how the delivery method that they're referring to would be. However, when you're listening to the community leaders, the community representatives, the voters out there, they overwhelmingly feel that there should be some sort of limited legalization of marijuana. I know that my opponent has brought that forth in the past. Why it's been shot down, I don't know. But there are a lot of medical concerns that people are dealing with marijuana with, in other words, terms of treatment. So what happened in that resolve, I don't know. We could probably find out with Mr. Sortwell. I'm not sure why that was shot down, but I know he did sponsor something, or not sponsor, but support a bill that legalizes a certain amount of marijuana.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Sortwell?
Yeah, I'm glad this issue's come up because, look, this is something that, once again, I pointed out what a true small government person stands for, like I stand for, is less government. If you're not bothering somebody else, then why is the government getting in your way of you making choices? Which, by the way, I think if you're using certain things like that, I actually think it's a bad idea. But it's not the government nanny state's job to make sure you're doing the right thing. Now, what have I worked on in Madison? And what has earned me, there's a marijuana, cannabis lobbying group, I guess, that's out there called NORML. And they've given me an A- rating, which is a pretty good rating for a Republican. You know, my competition got an F rating because he didn't answer their questions. So, but what have I worked on? I worked on a medical marijuana program in Madison. I was one of the working group that worked on the, I think it was Assembly Bill 750, if I remember the number correctly, which is the first Republican proposal for a medical marijuana program in the state of Wisconsin. Now, did it move? Unfortunately, it did not, in great part because the state Senate is full of people that are not going to let it move forward. And so that's the biggest problem there. Now, the other thing I also worked on was to make sure that if we ever do have a medical program, that it doesn't infringe on your Second Amendment rights. And so I drafted a bill that said if we have a medical program, it's not going to be used to violate your Second Amendment rights. And we have that one. And the third one I did was a decriminalization bill to say that basically anything under, I think it was 10 grams, would be a civil offense and not a criminal offense.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Maybe piggybacking on this a little bit, cannabidiol has really been getting a lot of press, in regards to, helping people with medical conditions such as seizures and so on and so forth. And we have a lot of CBD oil products and so on and so forth that some say work great. Some say I won't try it unless they're legally tested. And, I mean, we could talk about all this other stuff, but we're not here really to talk about a lot of legal ramifications. Maybe just a short response by each of you in regards to your support of or lack of support for cannabidiol, and would you feel that it would be long-term helpful for those that do suffer from these medical conditions, such as seizures? Mr. Sortwell?
Sure. CBD and other cannabinoids have actually been shown to be very useful for certain people. There's a bunch of different cannabinoids in different things from the cannabis plant. And so I think they've been actually very, very good for some people. Now, the thing about it, and I've been learning more about the science because, look, it's not really a thing that I know too much of in my background. But what I've heard from people, and as I've studied more on the issue, is there's a lot of interaction with these different cannabinoids within this product. And so that's why it's actually, I think, critically important that we continue to explore a medical program for medical marijuana and all the related products, because there's a lot of interactions that can create a whole lot more benefit than just CBD by itself. That could be great for some people, and for some people it's just not doing a whole lot because it doesn't have the other interactions.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley?
Yeah, well, CBD oils, things of this nature that I've been reading up on, the biggest concern with them is the fact that they're not really getting what they're paying for. That's the biggest concern. So there might be some minor regulatory issues going on in that point. But to get back to Mr. Sortwell's point about me receiving an F rating, maybe the reason I received by normal an F rating was because I didn't answer their questions. I will not fall victim to special interest groups. The only victim I'm going to fall victim to are the voters. They decide. I listen to them and not the special interest groups.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kiley. For those of you, again, just tuning in, this is the first of 3 Seehafer News radio debates, as today the 2 candidates vying for your vote to serve a 2-year term in Madison in the 2nd Assembly District, representing a majority of northern Manitowoc, northern Brown, and a sliver of Outagamie County in the city of Wrightstown. Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell, Democratic challenger Mark Kiley. We'll have more of our debate coming up. Seehafer News radio debates are presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
Welcome back to our Seehafer News radio debates on 107.9 WOMT and 97.1 WCUB. Presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc. I'm moderator Brian Norton, and again, our 2nd Assembly candidates vying for a 2-year term down in Madison to represent you in that district, comprising of a majority of northern Manitowoc, northern Brown, and a sliver of the city of Wrightstown and Outagamie County. The Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell and his challenger, Democrat Mark Kiley. Another question in here, gentlemen, and Mr. Kiley, we'll begin with you this time. We'll give you 90 seconds to respond. Question: do either of you agree with the current 25% capacity for taverns, restaurants, and businesses to help stop the spread of COVID-19? Mr. Kiley?
Unfortunately, I do agree with it because this COVID issue is very serious, and it's not going to solve itself. Somebody has to do something to curb this maddening disease. I thought it was ridiculous that a judge had to step in and block Tony Evers from this to begin with. We're tying it up in legal litigation. We should move forward, solve this problem, look at the science, and move forward so we can get back to normal as fast as possible.
Mr. Kiley, thank you. Mr. Sortwell?
No, I don't agree with the 25%. As a matter of fact, more accurately, it's a 75% shutdown. And you know why? Because if you actually follow the science, he's absolutely wrong. You know what the World Health Organization said? Shutdowns are a bad idea. They are more destructive to people. They're going to destroy people's lives. And that's why it's a bad idea. The World Health Organization, the leading experts on fighting viruses, on fighting illnesses, have said shutdowns, lockdowns are a bad idea. They're not good if they're just widespread. Now, if you're talking about individual things, and this is what the Republicans have been saying all along, if you've got localized issues and you've got an outbreak somewhere, then absolutely we can come back and say, okay, well, maybe this area needs to be doing some sort of shutdown temporarily while you tamp it back down. Because remember, again, from the very beginning, this was about controlling the spread, because we know eventually, sooner or later, everybody is going to be exposed to it. We just want to make sure it's tamped down and controlled so we don't overwhelm hospitals. That's the idea of what we were trying to do from the very get-go. Evers said it, Trump said it, everybody said it. So that's what the World Health Organization has said, okay? And we've had suicides skyrocketing. We have had mental health breakdown. I just got a call from a friend yesterday who's literally saying, my business is shut down, and he's not in a bar, he's not in a restaurant. It's because these businesses that he's trying to serve are being shut down, and he can't. And now he's looking to sell his 10-year business or just end it completely. He's got to get rid of property he's got. It's ridiculous. And so the science says localize it. Don't just do one size fits all across the state.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. I'd like to piggyback on this for a second, if I can, gentlemen. And Mr. Sortwell, you can begin this time. As you know, there's been one lawsuit after another, and Governor Evers has issued public health emergency orders. They've been tied up in court. One recently by the Tavern League of Wisconsin was recently overturned, and now it's back, limiting the capacity to 25% and so on. Now, I believe it was Majority Leader Jim Steineke who recently said that members of your party, the Republicans, basically, at least this is what he said, he believes in mask wearing, he believes in social distancing, washing your hands, and good health protocol, and so on and so forth. The big bugaboo he has is that he feels that Governor Evers is not following the law. He is circumventing the law, getting around it to enact these orders through Public Health Secretary designee Andrea Palm. And they want to take care of that, and not necessarily these health mandates or public health emergencies that are being edicted into the state by Governor Evers at this time. Mr. Sortwell, could you just kind of explain yourself? Put it this way, do you agree with what Mr. Steineke says, and that if Governor Evers were to follow the law, would you have any issues?
Well, it depends what he would exactly propose. So, Representative Steineke, Majority Leader Steineke, brought up what is probably the most critical point, which is the idea that no person is above the law. It doesn't matter if you're a representative, it doesn't matter if you're a private citizen, or if you're a governor. Nobody is above the law. And you may agree with a mask mandate. You may agree with the shutdown. You may agree with any of these actions that the governor is taking. But let me ask you this. When the shoe is on the other foot, and you have somebody in there that you don't like, that somebody that is proposing things that you don't want, do you want somebody to be able to operate outside the law and basically be able to say there's an emergency and there's nothing you can do about it? That's the biggest issue, especially with the most recent one with the shutdown order, because it's not even under the emergency declaration statute. He's trying to claim that this could be done anytime without an emergency. That's what's happening under Chapter 252 with his designee. He's literally saying, I have the power to shut down the state and do whatever I want as long as I claim it's health related without a public declaration of emergency. That is a very troubling and very dangerous precedent to set. Now, I think we can have this discussion. We actually had proposals we gave to the governor back in May that we wanted to discuss with him about doing this from a regional perspective. He refused to do it, and he continues to refuse to do it now.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley?
Well, I have a feeling that anybody believes that this is not an emergency hasn't been living. I've got a question. I'm dealing with a respiratory disease. If I get COVID, I got a doctor that's going to say there's no ventilators that's going to bring me back. If I got someone who's careless and not wearing a mask and masking up and taking the precautions, and I get sick from contact tracing, when it's determined contact tracing, are they becoming negligent? Bodily harm? I mean, this is serious. This is not going to go away itself. We have to take the responsibility of doing it ourselves. If I'm looking around this room, I see 4 people in here right now wearing masks. I've seen 2 of them go into the bathroom and wash their hands. It's not that hard to do. I hear a lot of verbal vomit, and it makes no sense. You're just making up excuses. It's here, it's there, we have to take care of it. Simple as that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kiley. This kind of dovetails a gentleman into a point that I would like to bring up in terms of, I guess, getting along to get along, bipartisanship, and so on. With COVID-19, I guess, being the backdrop to this one, I guess, Mr. Kiley, I'm going to begin with you. How would you like to see both sides of the aisle get together peacefully in a room, discuss the issues, and come to some sort of consortium? Because I believe it's been now, I think, 170 days where both sides haven't met on this issue. They don't want to seem to budge. They think one side is right, the other side is wrong, and so on. And it does cause some tension. I mean, there is no question about it. And citizens get a little bit concerned that people that they pick to represent them just can't seem to get along in Madison to solve some issues. So I guess the question to you is, what can happen if you are elected? What would you like to see happen so both sides of the aisle can come to some sort of consortium?
Well, that's a really good question, and thank you for it. I really do believe that both sides of the aisle have to start discussions within their own party. They have to agree that the only way to get anything done is with compromise. I know Mr. Sortwell has done it a couple times with a couple of bills that he went across the aisle and agreed with, and that's a start. But to sit there and just badmouth each other and do anything and not do anything is not the answer. These people that are representing the voters have to realize that the voters are the ones they're representing. And the voters have to realize that if they want to change, it's called Election Day. Just move on to someone else. You have to compromise, you have to give, you have to take, and you have to come to a partial bill, if anything, so you can improve on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. I believe, Mr. Sortwell, it has been going on 6 months since both sides of the aisle have not been able to meet on this issue because I guess there's no other way to put it. Maybe both sides are stubborn and they feel that they just can't get what they want in terms of compromise. So I guess, would you like to see both sides of the aisle get together soon and come to some common ground on this issue?
Sure. So, as my competitor over there mentioned, look, I have been more than willing to work with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. I've been on some bills, some Democrat bills that none of my other Republican colleagues would touch, because I happen to agree with them, and I don't care if it's a Republican bill or a Democrat bill. Now, on specifically COVID relief, we actually did have a COVID relief bill that we passed earlier in the year. It was a pretty comprehensive bill. And we gave a whole lot of authority to the governor to do a whole lot of different things. And he's utilized some of it, and some of it he's not utilized, including tens of millions of dollars that we handed him. He still hasn't used it. Now, maybe he's saving it, and that's fine. Maybe he thinks there's a better time to use it. Point is we actually gave him this authority. And we've continued to actually work with the governor. The media hasn't talked about it. But, for instance, the way that it's supposed to operate with these laws, you pass laws, but then they're always implemented by state rules, and which are always started by the administration from their different departments. They write a rule to implement the law, okay? And we've given him, so far, every time he's proposed a rule, the committee that oversees rules has voted to allow him to have these rules. And so we have actually been continuing to work with him on that. Now, as far as some of these bigger issues go, as far as like the shutdown, what we've said from the very beginning is, look, that needs to be done by rule. And the rule has to be started by the administration. He started to do it once he lost the court case earlier in the year, and then all of a sudden he pulled it back and he didn't continue forward with that proposal. So that's the thing when you look at it, is he needs to continue to go forward with it and then let the legislature weigh in through that process.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. I guess one more question here on this topic before we go to break. And this comes to us on the WNT Shoreline text line, Mr. Sortwell. Question is simply this: what is your specific plan to deal with this epidemic?
My specific plan is exactly the plan that we proposed to the governor. When was that? May, I think it was. We proposed to the governor, said, look, this needs to be regional. A lot, if you want to be able to shut down certain things in certain areas because you have an outbreak, that's understandable. People can understand that and appreciate it. Shutting down everywhere because you have an outbreak in one area of the state, you're just hurting everybody. That's not the proper way to do it. And so think about it from any other health issue that you have. If you have a salmonella outbreak at a local school or at a restaurant or whatever, you don't shut down the county. You shut down that restaurant. Or you shut down that school if it's got a salmonella outbreak. Now, this is a little bit more widespread of an issue. So yes, you are going to have to do more in a given area, but you can, for instance, say, okay, the Green Bay area is having an issue, so we're going to kind of tamp down that area now. Or Manitowoc is having an issue, we're going to tamp down that area. Or Milwaukee. You don't shut down Superior because Dane County has an issue. You don't shut down Two Rivers because Milwaukee has an issue. You use common sense and you say, this is where the issue is. This is the idea that we've been promoting for 6 months. And for some reason, he keeps wanting to do one size fits all. And it just doesn't work for the state.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley, please.
Yeah, on the other hand, though, when I was, Shae, look, when I was reading some of the bills that you supported and everything, Governor Evers wanted to, what I consider to be using a line item veto. In other words, take parts of the bill and scratch off other parts of the bill. Now, that was in there. I believe I have it with me, but we don't have the time right now because we are in a time constraint, and we could talk about that after the show. But at the same time, if that's the case, how can anybody isolate one town just because there's an outbreak and not isolate the whole thing? Secondly, you have to realize that Wisconsin in the whole is the unbelievably, contaminated. We're probably the top in the nation. So when you want to isolate the entire state, that's it. The thing of it is, what we have to do is fund the people that are going to be affected by the shutdown. We have to help these people. They need to pay their bills. They need to eat. They need the unemployment coverage that's going to be coming through. And that's pretty much the bottom line.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. And for those of you just tuning in, welcome to our first of three Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center Manitowoc. As today our first debate is between the two candidates vying for your vote in Madison to represent the 2nd Assembly District, representing a majority of northern Manitowoc and northern Brown, and a sliver of the city of Wrightstown in Outagamie County. Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell. Challenger is Democrat Mark Kiley. Seehafer News radio debates are presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center Manitowoc. My name is Brian Norton, the moderator of today's debate. And again, the candidates for the 2nd Assembly District to represent you in Madison are joining us here today. Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell. His challenger is Democrat Mark Kiley. I want to remind you that tomorrow from 1 to 2, the two candidates of the 6th Congressional District, incumbent Glenn Grothman and challenger Democrat Jessica King, will be here. And then we'll wrap up our series of Seehafer News radio debates on Thursday afternoon from 1 to 2 o'clock with the two candidates from the 25th Assembly District, incumbent Paul Tittle and challenger Carrie Trask. And that will be our Seehafer News radio debate series for this 2020 election cycle. If you have anything that you would like the candidates to divulge on, our WOMT Shoreline text line is open. You must dial the area code 920-682-4674, and we'll get it on the air for you. We will not take any phone calls today. I see the phones that are ringing, but unfortunately we just don't have time to do it. So please do not call. We thank you for your cooperation. Okay, we just have a question in here, gentlemen. I had one that I want to talk a little bit about, but we're going to go ahead and ask this one first. And Mr. Kiley, we're going to begin with you in regards to your thoughts on Black Lives Matter.
They do. All lives matter. I don't think, I'm blind to black, white, green. Well, if you're green and sprout antennas, I'm going to call you my favorite Martian. My dad taught me a lesson a long time ago, early in life. Everybody in this world is different. And you can learn something from everybody that crosses your path at any day of the week. Black lives matter. White lives matter. Everybody's life matters. It's just we have to get away from discrimination type of attitudes that, we just can't tolerate. We're above that. We're better than that. This is something that should have been gone long ago. And I'm a little at odds as to what to do other than, change the culture in our society. We got to change the culture. Leadership can do that, but you got to change the culture of where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Sortwell, would you like to respond?
Sure. So, the issue with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, is we need to separate the argument from the organization, right? There's a national organization called Black Lives Matter. And if you look at the national organization, it's not an organization I terribly favor. You know, the founder of it literally said that they are a Marxist. Not a fan of Marxism, not a fan of socialism. That is different from the issue of criminal justice reform. And if you look at my record on criminal justice reform, I have been one of the leading advocates for criminal justice reform in Madison on the Republican side of the aisle, okay? So I think there is a lot that we can do to improve our justice system. Some things that, in fact, Texas does that Wisconsin doesn't, and it's not like Texas is known for being horribly liberal. And so I had a great conversation, a sit-down conversation with a gentleman who was actually leading some of the Black Lives Matter marches in De Pere. I sat down with him and talked with him for 2 hours. And I said, look, these are the types of things I'm working on. And these are things that everybody should more or less agree on. They're not terribly controversial issues. Unfortunately, they do become political. But they shouldn't be all that political. They're just common sense proposals. And so I've been working on some of these things. And this gentleman was very happy that I met with him. I approached him. He didn't even approach me. I approached him and said, let's talk about this. So do Black Lives Matter? Of course. I don't like the national organization, but I think there's a lot we can do in the criminal justice system that's not defunding our police and, burning down our cities.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Let me piggyback on this. And again, I don't want to get too political or run off a rabbit trail and so on. All of us heard of what happened in Kenosha. It was a travesty, no question about it. Everything that has happened in regards to the shooting of Jacob Blake. And I guess both sides were critical of one another of how things should have happened, not happened, and so on and so forth. I guess I begin with you, Mr. Sortwell. I guess who could be responsible, more viable? Can changes be made to get a quicker response to stop some of this stuff that goes on when people feel that injustices are being done? And what can be done, in your opinion, to try to make some efforts to, curb this behavior and get some more calm and reason here?
You know what? The most important thing that can be done is have leadership that says, let's slow down and wait to find out what happened. And that is why there's 4 different organizations that represent police across the state of Wisconsin, the Badger Sheriffs, et cetera. There's several of them. And all 4 of them signed on to a letter sent to the governor and to the lieutenant governor saying, you are making things worse. You are fomenting violence. They may not use that exact term. I don't remember the exact word they used. But you are increasing violence in the city of Kenosha by your reckless statements. That's pretty big when the law enforcement agencies across the state are united saying the governor of the state of Wisconsin is making things worse and making violence worse in the city of Kenosha. That is huge. We need representatives, we need governors, we need local officials to take a step back and say, we don't know what's happened yet. Somebody got hurt, somebody got shot, somebody got killed, whatever the circumstance is in whatever given incident that occurred. You need to take a step back and say, okay, let's wait and find out what happened. And then let's wait and see if there was in fact a problem and an officer did something they shouldn't do. Let's wait to see if the system as it is, hold that person accountable. Now, if they don't hold them accountable, if there was an issue, if they did something wrong and they're not held accountable, then we should be looking to change the law. But until we actually get to that point, for all you know, the system is actually going to fix that problem. So we need to be slow, we need to be deliberate, and we need to let the system work.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley?
Well, let me just first say what Mr. Sortwell was saying about national organizations before and Black Lives Matter. Yeah, it's a Black Lives Matter national organization. I got that. But there are going to be national organizations, and you can't diminish their freedoms from having those organizations. Now, they have to operate legally. Making things worse, that's just a matter of opinion. Listen, we were going to talk about mental health and everything and what police are doing. I news for you. In Two Rivers, I know a lot of these police. They are very good police. You can't diminish what they do just because one snaps, which might go into mental health. They might need the resources to have them deal with what they deal with every day on a daily basis. They're not there because they have a job that they wanted to apply for. They're there because they wanted to be in law enforcement. And it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job to go to work every day and be afraid of what might happen. It's not an easy job to walk into a room on any kind of time and not know what's ahead of you. So I respect those police officers, and I understand what Mr. Sortwell says, wait for the system to work, but as of now, it's not working.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. You are listening to our first of three of Seehafer News radio debates this election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc. We are joined today by the two candidates vying to serve you in the 2nd Assembly District for the next 2 years in Madison. They're Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell and Democratic challenger Mark Kiley. If you have anything that you would like to have the candidates expound on, 920-682-4674 is our WOMT Shoreline text line. Go ahead and just shoot us a text, and we'll do our best to get that question on in the remaining moments of the program. Or should I say the debate? The Seehafer News radio debate, to be specific, presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
And welcome back to our first of three Seehafer News radio debates this election cycle, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. My name is Brian Norton, moderator of today's debate. And again, the two candidates vying for your vote to represent you the next 2 years in Madison in the 2nd Assembly District, encompassing a majority of northern Manitowoc, northern Brown, and a sliver of Outagamie County. In the city of Wrightstown, Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell, challenger Democrat Mark Kiley. Gentlemen, here's a question that was sent in to us, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. Mr. Kiley, we'll begin with you this time, please. Question is, have you taken the Fair Maps pledge to end gerrymandering, and what led you to the decision that you made? Mr. Kiley?
Yeah, good. Thank you for asking me that question. That was one of the things that was sent to the committee online. I looked at it. I took the pledge, gerrymandering is a difficult thing that most politicians are going to be dealing with. Whether it goes away or not, I don't know. Whether we can improve that situation and work across the aisle and fight some of this gerrymandering, but some of it is how you're going to have the people represented. We talked about that even before we came in the room today. Shae mentioned a little bit about it, and I took the pledge. Simple as that.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Sortwell?
Sure. Well, I understand that this is kind of a big issue coming from the Democrat Party. That's primarily the ones that are pushing this. Now, I know it sounds good. Nonpartisan redistricting sounds good, right? Here's the issue with it. Is the state constitution. The state constitution says very specifically that the legislature redraws the maps. Now, if you want to change that and do a constitutional amendment, then propose that. This let's get around it standpoint, and let's get around the Constitution. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And quite honestly, I understand where they're trying to come from. Once again, nonpartisan. It sounds good. Okay. Now, but what are you actually doing? You are taking power away from the actual elected government of the state of Wisconsin and giving it to some sort of unelected bureaucrats, etc. So what's going to happen right now going forward after this? We have a census going on right now. It's ending. I think it just ended, actually. And so now they're going to redraw the maps. We're going to start redrawing the maps next session. The legislature will redraw them. However, the governor still has to sign off on it. Now, if he doesn't like the maps, he's going to veto them, which then means it's going to go to the court. And the court is then going to the courts are going to decide based off of certain metrics that say we want to make sure that maps are compact. We want to make sure we're not discriminating against certain populations based off of ethnicity or such things. And the courts, who, by the way, the courts are also elected by the people of the state of Wisconsin, whether it's your local judge or the state Supreme Court, they are the ones, they are elected. So when all is said and done, if we draw a map that the governor doesn't like, he'll veto it. And if he vetoes it, then the elected court will make that decision. That's how it's going to be done, through the elected bodies.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Why don't we, we got time for one more question here before we got to take our final break. This comes to us on the WOMT Shoreline text line. Simply put, this particular listener would like to know each of your positions on passing legislation after an election, but before the winner takes office. That changes the power of that office. Have you ever voted for such legislation, and would you be in favor of it if so? And I guess, Mr. Sortwell, we'll start with you this time, please.
Well, that's kind of a two-part question. To answer whether I've ever done it, no, because I'm just finishing up my first term right now. So win or lose, this is my first term. So I've had no opportunity to do it. Now, I assume that they're asking about, commonly called the lame duck session after the last election, when Governor Walker
Correct.
lost,
Yeah.
and Governor Evers was still waiting to come into office. So you know what's interesting about that is the side that always gets, kind of gets kind of beat down by that, doesn't like it, is the side that is always, the side that didn't manage to push through something they liked at the last minute. Let me tell you what happened a little over 10 years ago when Governor Doyle was leaving office and Governor Walker was coming in. The Democrats literally got a representative out of prison on work release in order to pass a bill that they wanted to pass before Governor Walker came into office, because they needed his vote to pass it. So can we say that this is partisan? Can we say that it is something you don't like? You can say that, but they've literally done it. They literally got somebody out of prison to pass something because they wanted to keep Walker from doing something once he got into office. So would I be open to it? If it's a good policy, I don't care when it's proposed. Is it good policy or is it not? If it's good policy, I'll vote for it. If it's bad policy, I'll vote no.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley, please.
Yeah, to follow up on what Shae just said, yeah, if it's good policy, you can vote for it. If it's bad policy, you can't vote for it. You got to do what's best for the people who put you in the office to begin with. I understand where it's coming from in the fact that maybe some of this legislation was put forward by the constituents before the election, and now that the election's taken place, they all changed their mind and voted for someone else. Maybe they're thinking it wasn't such a good idea. So you have to, it's a really, really fine line you're crossing in the fact that you might lose your next election because you're voting in such a way for policies that the people really don't want you to pass to begin with. So I don't know if that answers your question so much, caller or texter, but I hope I did my best to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. And with that, why don't we sneak our final break in of today's first of three Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. Winding up our time today with the two candidates vying for your vote to represent you in the 2nd Assembly District, comprising a majority of northern Manitowoc, northern Brown, and a sliver of Outagamie County within the city of Wrightstown. Republican incumbent Shae Sortwell, Democratic challenger Mark Kiley. Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center, Manitowoc.
Hi, this is Jeremiah Novak, and I want to thank you for tuning in to 2020 Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center. These debates are giving you the chance to hear from our local candidates directly and where they stand on issues that are important to you. Remember, elections are decided by the people that get out and vote, so please exercise your right and vote. Novak Service Center and Seehafer News, keeping you informed and updated.
Welcome back as we wind down our first of three Seehafer News radio debates here on this election cycle. Election Day 2020 only 2 weeks away. Hard to believe, isn't it? And Seehafer News radio debates presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. I'm moderator Brian Norton, joined again by the incumbent of the 2nd Assembly District at this time, Republican Shae Sortwell, his challenger this election cycle, Democrat Mark Kiley. Yeah, we have one more time. Well, let's sneak this in quickly, shall we, gentlemen, from the WOMT Shoreline text line. Question simply put, what's your view on school funding? And Mr. Kiley, we begin with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because that was in my closing statements. There were a lot of things that I'd like to address right now is school funding. We need to fund these schools. We need to recognize that the teachers there are unsung heroes. They're dealing with a situation, you're on again, off again, on again, off again, and they are mentoring our children and developing a society. We need to get broadband. We need to get things that we need to listen to these teachers. I've been listening to the school administrator, the district administrator of the teachers, and she will never not pick up the phone. She will give you all the information that you need. We need to fund these schools. We need to allocate the money for it. We need to address other things too, because I know we're closing out this. We need to address minimum wage. We need to address Act 10. We need to address a number of things. But yes, these teachers need to be funded, and the schools need to be funded.
Thank you, Mr. Kiley. Mr. Sortwell?
Sure. Well, it's a rather broad question about funding schools. In the last budget, we had another very significant funding increase for public schools. And actually, through a line item veto, Governor Evers increased it a little bit more. But anyways, we had a very significant increase, just like we had a very significant increase in the funding for education in the budget prior to when I came into office. So it's been a pretty consistent trend that we've been trying to put more money into it. We're depends on how you look at it, but we're more or less at something called a 2/3 funding. 2/3 funding basically is 2/3 from the state, 1/3 from the local municipalities statewide. Districts are going to vary a little bit, but as a whole system. So we're pretty much at that, give or take. We're going to continue to try to put what we can into it. I think that's a bigger question here that we do need to address is we are probably going to be looking at a budget shortfall in the next budget, probably. I expect because of all these shutdowns and the destruction of so many small businesses. So we're going to do absolutely what we can. My number one goal is to make sure that we don't have any cuts. I know when Governor Doyle was closing out his term, he actually had to make significant cuts because of an economic downturn. That is absolutely nothing that anybody in the legislature wants to do, and I'm sure the governor doesn't want to do it. So that's going to be our number one priority, to make sure that we, at very least hold the line. And then we'll try to get them more as we see that. I've been meeting with superintendents every couple months. We meet with the superintendents from the district, and I've been talking with them. And their biggest thing is they want certainty. And I've been saying, look at it. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. And say, I think the worst is going to be we freeze things. And if we have extra that we could put in there, absolutely, let's do that. But it'll be a very tight budget. We got to be careful of it and look at all the issues.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. I think we got time for one more question, guys. And I just want to ask you as, we wrap in before we get to your closing statement. Why do you want the job? Why do you want to do this job? What drives you to do this job? Mr. Sortwell?
Sure. Well, I think I touched on it in my opening statement. But look, I am somebody who actually truly wants to be following the oath of office that we take. Too many people get into Madison and they forget about our Constitution. They forget about the principles of government. The Declaration of Independence says, and I know it's in my ads that I've been playing on the radio station for the last couple of weeks, the guiding principle of government. It says in the Declaration of Independence that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And that is our absolute number one priority for any government official, whether it's a state representative, a local policeman, whether it's the governor. It doesn't matter what position you have in government. Your number one duty is to protect the freedoms of the people. And that is something that too often I think is forgotten by Republicans or Democrats. Instead, they focus on things that they want, what they like. And that's something that frustrates me to no end, because it seems too often that my job is going to my colleagues, Republicans and Democrats, and saying, your principles are against this bill. Why are you supporting it? And then they stare at me like a deer in the headlights, and they're like, your principles say no because you support freedom. And if you support freedom, just stand up for it. The people will support you.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. Mr. Kiley.
Well, as Mr. Sortwell said, we're dealing with the primary duties of what a legislator should be. Well, the biggest one, in my opinion, is listen to the constituents and try and accomplish what they sent you there to do. I mean, you've got to listen to them. You've got to try and draft a legislation that will not only serve them, but serve the rest of the state as an example as well. I don't have the experience that Shae has in office. He can give examples of what he did. I cannot, but I can in 2 years when we're back here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kiley. And I guess with that, it's time now for our closing statements. And Mr. Sortwell, you chose to go first. It was agreed upon, so why don't you go ahead and give us your closing statement, please.
Thank you so much. And once again, thank you to all the people of the 2nd Assembly District who have been listening in and trying to hear from the candidates and see where we stand. Look, I think I've been a pretty open book. I don't try to pretend to be something I'm not. I try to let you know exactly where I stand. For the last 2 years, every time there's been a vote, even when there's a voice vote and too many politicians try to hide their stance, I go up and I register my vote. And I tell you why I had to vote against it. Now, sometimes you might look at the title of the bill and think to yourself, well, why would he oppose that? Because the title of the bill and what the bill actually does too often is not the same thing. And so that's something I have done my absolute best to do, is make sure I've told you where I stand on the issue, every single issue. I don't try to beat around the bush. I don't try to hide it from you. And I try to get back to every constituent when they contact me. I've gotten hundreds and thousands of contacts over the last 2 years. I've tried to call as many of them back as I possibly could. The ones I couldn't get a hold of on the phone or whatever, I would email back. That has been consistently something I've done. So if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for somebody who's going to uphold your rights and is going to continue to make sure that he is doing what is necessary for the people of Wisconsin and good for the people of the 2nd Assembly District, then I ask for you to vote either starting today. You can do early voting in person in any of the city halls, or vote on November 3rd. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Sortwell. And Mr. Kiley, go ahead, please.
Well, since nobody really knows me that well because I haven't been in office, I hope that the listeners that vote in the 2nd District have recognize the contrast between me and Mr. Sortwell. That would help them in their voting decision. I hope that they recognize me as a proud, hardworking individual that I am. I'm a hometown guy that wants to work hard for you. I would hope that you can recognize me as a person that wants to restore honor, integrity, respect within the Capitol building. I am a person that has a desire to craft legislation that benefits both sides of the aisle and benefits the constituents as well. I would make an effort to improve the state's health care through Badger Care. There's $1 billion on the table that can be used for that. We should address the conditions of our roads, not to mention continuing groundwater problem and more. The other driving force is it's in my family, it's in my blood. My grandfather, World War I, my father, World War II. My brother right now is suffering down in Sheboygan from Vietnam. And this is my only chance to serve.
I want to thank both of you, Representative Sortwell and Mr. Kiley. Thanks for coming in and sharing your views on the issues. We very much appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us today, and good luck on November 3rd to both of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. Join us again tomorrow, 1 to 2 o'clock, when we have the two candidates from the 6th Congressional District, incumbent Glenn Grothman and challenger Jessica King, to join us on the Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center in Manitowoc. And with that, we say good afternoon.
Thank you for listening to the 2020 Seehafer News Radio Debates, presented by Novak Service Center. Learn more about the candidates and the issue that matters most to you by visiting seehafernews.com.